Hello, this is Signals from the Hill, a podcast about comics from Avery Hill Publishing. I'm Kat Chapman, Head of Marketing and Production for Avery Hill. In this episode, I talked to Tim Bird, creator of several Avery Hill books over the years, including the award-winning Grey Area series, The Great North Word, and most recently Adrift on a Painted Sea, which came out on the 1st of October. Tim Bird is an illustrator and comic artist based in Winchester, who's just finished an MA in illustration at Falmouth University. As well as his books with Avery Hill Publishing, he's self-published a number of zines and webcomics such as Rock and Pop and It's a Bird's Life. He's also contributed work to several anthologies. His comic Grey Area from the City to the Sea won Best Comic at the British Comic Awards in 2015. In this conversation, we talk about family, memory, loss, art, and making quiet comics. So I'm here with Tim Bird talking about his new book, Adrift on a Painted Sea, which I've got a copy of here. It's a really lovely book, Tim. Could you tell us a little bit about what made you want to make this particular book?
I think I wanted to share my mum's paintings. Was the initial idea for it. She sort of painted throughout her life. She'd done all sorts of things like landscapes and lots of botanical paintings, but she seemed to come back to this idea of painting the sea. So there are lots of paintings of the sea. And she never really did anything with her paintings, so they just filled up my parents' house. It's just full of drawers and cupboards of all her paintings. And I think when she started to get ill, I thought it'd be nice to sort of display them or share them a bit more. So I thought maybe put on an exhibition or something. But then the more I thought about it, the more I thought it was the sort of the stories behind the paintings that felt important to me. And so putting them into that kind of context, with like a kind of family stories, just kind of lent itself to a book, really, rather than an exhibition. And the idea originally was to do these kind of poster zines, where there'd be like a painting on one side and you could unfold it and it would make a little zine with a story. But then it just didn't seem practical, really. And Dave asked me if I was working on anything, and I told him about this, and he said maybe that would be a good fit for an Avery Hill book. So I decided to make it into a book.
Right. Yes, you mention in the book that your mum never really exhibited or sold her work much at all.
No.
She just seemed to love painting in its own right, which
Yeah,
is a really
I
lovely.
mean, it's just a hobby, I guess, for her. And she enjoyed the creative part of painting. Yeah, and I guess it's something I've been thinking about a lot as well. So I'm trying to, make my career out of drawing, drawing comics and illustrations and things. So it's a weird line between doing something because you love doing it and doing it because you want to earn money from it. And I wondered why my mum never really tried to sell her work, and she did. She gave lots of them away, her paintings, to friends and things. But I think she just, maybe the way she was brought up, or her sort of opinion about work, was that yeah, that she that like painting wasn't a proper career. Maybe like she was a librarian, so that was quite a, that's what she did for work, and then the painting was quite separate from that, I guess.
Yeah, in a way, it almost seems like a quite a healthy way to be, because it can be tough when you sort of try and make something that you really love into your job. It can sort of it's a tricky balance to get right, because you can end up sort of enjoying it less because it's your job.
Yeah, or you can spend lots of time working on things that you don't really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Particularly if it's like, commissioned work and stuff. And then you just take away the enjoyment from it, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely had that experience when I was trying to be a children's illustrator, that I wasn't really very connected with the material a lot of the time, and I found it a lot better once I got into comics because I could sort of pick and choose more. I could tell my own stories, and not feel like I was trying to fit into a very narrow sort of category of an industry or whatever. In the book, you show the sort of moment when your mum started going to art classes when you were young, and she would come back and sort of show you what she'd been working on. Do you think that rubbed off on you? Did it inspire you, or were you already kind of interested in drawing?
Well, I think that's where I sort of got my interest in drawing from. I have this really specific memory of her showing me how to make objects look 3D. So, taking a square and kind of extending the lines to give it perspective, and then adding shadows and stuff. I think having, because she was so enthusiastic about it, like she'd tell me, what she'd learned, but then she also sort of started learning about art history and stuff as well. And I think her enthusiasm for that definitely rubbed off. And I remember we started going to like art galleries and stuff. I was, I guess, like 9 or 10 or something, and it had never really been something we'd done before. But like she would suddenly, like she'd learned about a particular artist, and we'd sort of go and find their paintings in the gallery and stuff. It's like a bit of a new experience.
I mean, I love the book on so many levels, but my mum is a painter as well. She doesn't do a lot anymore, but I definitely grew up around that kind of thing as well. She would occasionally exhibit, a few pieces here and there, but it was definitely something she did throughout most of her adult life. So yeah, I could relate to having the stacks of artwork lying around and things.
So I guess it's lots of people do this, or maybe not even with paintings, but just over their life that they have a hobby and accumulate like a wealth of material and stuff. And then it's thinking about what do you do with that, like after that person has died. It's like it's like so meaningful to her immediate family, but then beyond that, it's sort of they're just paintings of the sea, I guess. But and for like I don't know, even for like my kids, they're not particularly special. So it feels like if I don't do something with them, then no one else is going to really.
But I mean, the book comes across as just a lovely sort of tribute to her work and her sort of creative spirit. And what is particularly lovely is the way that you kind of mix your art with hers on the page, which is really, I mean, I've not really seen that done before. Particularly, I've seen artists collaborate sort of on, like, I'm thinking of like Robert Crumb and his wife and things who would do comics together, but this is just a really beautiful kind of fusion of the two styles and things.
I think well, I did worry a bit that I was drawing over the top of their work, but I've tried to do it in places where it doesn't really interfere with like the subject matter of her paintings. But I think it just I wanted to show that there was like a connection between my experience or my memory and her work. So it's like kind of literally her painting becomes the backdrop of my childhood. So it's that literal background to the comics.
It's really effective, and just really beautiful. I can understand having that slight misgiving about like putting something over the artwork, but I think the intent is so clear that it's a sort of really lovely sort of tribute to her, that I don't think that's an issue.
And I guess the other thing with putting them onto a page where it's like a fixed format is you don't really get the idea of them all being different scales and shapes. So they
Ah.
some of them are like cropped a bit and things as well. So it's
Yeah,
I mean, and I found it hard to digitize them nicely. So
yeah,
then
that's tricky.
because they're quite in some of them the painting is quite thick, so kind
Mm.
of that texture a bit. So I experimented with photographing them and scanning them and stuff. And I think in the end I scanned them and then did a bit of like Photoshop to try and get the color balance and stuff right.
Yeah, I had that same experience with my mum early on when I got a scanner of
Yeah.
trying to make prints of her work and stuff, and finding it's really hard to take a painting and reproduce it
Mm.
well. And I think that learning process was quite useful to me later with my own work of figuring out, yeah, a painting or a drawing on paper can scan really, really poorly, and you have to do quite a lot to it to get it to actually look right. It's a whole technical thing.
Yeah.
But I remember Ricky saying there's a page in the book that he particularly loves, which is the one where your mum's this one here sitting on the sofa with all the
Oh, yeah.
paintings above. So that's kind of gives a nice reminder that these works are actually physical things and they're all different shapes and sizes.
Yeah, yeah. And we did have lots of my dad does still have lots of her paintings up in there in his house. And it's nice that they're sort of used to decorate and stuff. So
Yeah.
there are lots of them are on show. So it's nice.
How does your dad feel about the book?
Uh, I, I think well, he said he liked it, so I'm happy with that. I think I think I started making the book quite shortly after my mum had died, so it's quite raw in places. And I think sort of 2 years later, I looking back at it, I think I would have done it quite differently now. Um,
Really?
yeah, because I think there's quite a big focus on her being ill, and that's sort of in the immediate aftermath of her dying. That was sort of the main thing I remembered. But
Mm.
now with a bit more time, I remember her, her life being a bit more complete, maybe, and maybe I should have
Mhm.
shown that a bit more in the book. But I think it's a record of that time, so I'm happy with it. And yeah, I think my dad found it a bit upsetting, but he
Yeah,
said it was a nice way to honour her and show her work. So that's what I wanted to get across. Really.
yeah. And I mean, I think it's powerful for the fact that it has that rawness from being, made quite soon after her passing, because you feel that, and it's an experience that almost every human being has to
Yeah,
tackle at some point in
yeah,
their life. So yeah, I think that's why people find it so moving, because they can recognize their
yeah.
own experience in it.
Um, yeah, I'd started sort of putting ideas together for the book like before she passed away. Um, and I talked to her about doing something with her paintings, and um, I'm not sure if she was particularly keen for me to do it, but like she wasn't against the idea. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, uh, and yeah, at that point it was the idea of doing the poster zines and sort of just more of a way of showing her work, like without the the narrative, I guess, with it. So
Mm.
um, yeah, the whole thing obviously changed once she died, but it did give this kind of structure, I guess, to the book.
Yeah. Um, and it's interesting as well in that it captures that very specific period when COVID was happening,
Yeah,
and I mean, losing a family member is awful at the best of times, but during that period, that was just a horrible time for that to happen to people.
yeah. I
So
think we it happened sort of towards the end, so in a way, we were lucky that we could go into the hospital and visit,
Mm.
but it was still, one person at a time, and wearing masks and everything. So it felt strange, but I mean, I guess only a few months previously, we just wouldn't have been allowed into the hospital, and
Yeah,
it's
which is
made it
just
even more heartbreaking, really.
yeah, it's awful. Did you
Yeah.
find it hard to sort of write about something that was so personal, or did
Um,
you find it kind of useful in a way in terms of helping you deal with it?
yeah, it definitely helped me process my feelings about it.
Mm.
And it was hard, but I don't know. I'm someone who like bottles up my feelings anyway, so I think being able to kind of write it down actually was just helped me let it out a little bit.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I can definitely relate relate to that. I definitely find it easier to put things in writing or drawing.
yeah.
Um,
And I think maybe
I-
because she had been ill for a few years, I, I guess you kind of start that grieving process um, a bit a bit earlier. It's sort of a
mm,
bit of the journey. Um, and yeah, I mean, I obviously wasn't prepared properly for her dying, but I knew, I guess it was going to happen.
mm,
Um, and so then writing about it, uh, I guess kind of felt like completing that journey a little bit, although it's still a process. But
yeah.
yeah.
Um, I'm really curious why do you think she loved painting the sea particularly? I mean, you write about all the sort of family holidays by the sea.
Yeah,
Do you think it was just that fact that it had always been part of her life?
yeah. I don't know if I think in the book I write that she wanted to be a marine
Oh
biologist
yeah,
when
of
she
course.
was
Yeah.
young. Um, and I remember her telling me that, but then because she did study biology at university, so she wasn't like a trained artist. But
Mm,
I think, yeah, I'm not sure what like really drew her to the sea. I've sort of tried to think about that, but I couldn't really answer it. But I also really like being by the sea,
mm,
um, and I think for me it's the sort of the expanse of it and the kind of feeling. I don't know, like a connection, I guess, to nature and stuff. And
yeah.
yeah, I guess the sort of overpoweringness of the sea is kind of like puts you in your place a bit. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. That and I find mountains as well, if you're kind of
yeah, yeah,
standing on a mountain and looking out, it has a similar effect on you where yeah, you're just kind of awed by the vastness of it.
yeah,
It's kind of humbling.
yeah, definitely. And then because my mum really liked just picking up shells and
Mm.
pebble things, and like collecting those. So yeah, I don't know.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about the shipping forecast,
Oh yeah.
because that's a motif in a couple of your books, and I've
Oh
got your
yeah.
print at home on the wall of the shipping
Uh,
forecast.
yeah.
And I know that Avery Hill have quite a lot of readers in America now who probably
Oh
don't know
right.
what it is.
Yeah.
I wondered if you might explain if anyone doesn't know.
Well, it's like a weather forecast for the sea, I
Yeah.
guess, and it goes all around the UK. So it's for ships to know whether it's particularly stormy weather, I guess.
Hmm.
But the like the nice thing about it is it's sort of on the radio at like really early in the morning, and
Mm.
it's read out in this really kind of soporific voice,
Yeah.
and it has just a real rhythm to it, um, because they tell you that I can't remember the specific details of it, but they tell you the area that they're talking about, And the UK coastline is divided up into these areas, probably I guess about 20 maybe. So they say the area, which is like not, it's a weird
They're
name.
weird
It isn't
names.
really related to where it is. So it's
Yeah.
like Dogger and Fisher and Humber.
Mm-hmm.
And all these areas. And then they say like a number, which kind of tells you about the wind speed. And then there's like they have a descriptive word for the state of the sea. So like maybe it would be moderate or rough. Let's say becoming poor later and stuff like this. And it's just a really, I mean, it's quite a poetic sound, I guess. And it is, I did use it in one of my grey area comics where I just listed the areas. And so I've used it again here, but I've added a bit more detail in, and so I used the shipping forecast from the day my mum died, which is
wow.
a bit bleak maybe, but
no, that's really interesting. Yeah, because I mean the words describing the conditions can sort of be related to your sort of frame of mind, I guess, as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I've always loved the shipping forecast because I agree it has this weird poetry to it and this mystery, because it's kind of like out there at sea, and it always is really evocative to me of fishermen being out there going through God knows what conditions.
And I'm sure there's more high-tech things now, but yeah, you're right, you can just really imagine someone on a boat in the middle of the night, just in the dark, listening to the radio, and all they've got is these numbers being read out.
I mean, I guess even younger people in the UK probably don't know what it is these days.
I think there's this really, I can't remember, there's a poet who wrote a poem about the shipping forecasts. I'll have to look it up and send you the link. But
oh yeah, please do. Do you think your sort of childhood seaside holidays influenced your work in any specific ways?
Yeah, I'm sure they did. Like my parents were always keen on just like English seaside holidays. So we went abroad occasionally, but most of the time it was just like often just around Yorkshire, like not that far from home really. So, yeah, and I think it's given me that interest in sort of Englishness, like like the Martin Parr kind of boring postcards.
Yeah.
Enjoy those kinds of things where it's English people on holiday in the rain.
Yeah, I was going to say English holidays really give you a lesson in how to try and get some enjoyment out of adverse conditions.
Yeah, it makes me think of like doing jigsaws or playing cards whilst it's raining, and you think you can just be at home, really.
Yeah. But I think I've always been quite influenced by travel to different places, whether it's not too far or whether it's far away, just because I feel like there's something about being in a new place that you really sort of focus on that place and what's unique about it and what's different about it to what you're familiar with. And I've always found that really inspiring for my work, I think.
Yeah. I recently went on holiday to Orkney in Scotland, or an island just off Scotland. And I'm thinking of making a little comic about that.
Oh, brilliant.
Travel theme. I've never really done one like that before, but I know they're quite a sort of staple of the self-publishing comic scene, like the travel scene. So yeah, I'm going to do something with that, I think.
I always love reading people's travel zines because I think I love travel so much, and it captures that excitement of being in a new
Yeah,
place and just being kind of amazed by things.
yeah. Because I quite often write comics about places, but places I'm quite familiar with. So it's nice to sort of see a place through like fresh eyes and have that awe and excitement about it. So,
Yeah.
yes.
And I definitely found when I spend a lot of time, when I spent 9 months abroad when I was in my 20s, and then coming back to the UK, it gave me a sort of fresh eyes to look at the familiar stuff, which was really cool.
Yeah.
So I was very sort of not into the UK at that time. But when I came back, I actually kind of was noticing things that I had never really noticed before. So that was cool. We did a Kickstarter for your book, which went really, really well. And one of the things you made related to that was a little zine where you talked about some of the background, which is really cool. And you spoke a little bit in the zine about trying different sort of art styles for the project. Could you
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit and how you sort of,
Um,
because your books sometimes do have slightly different styles from one project to the next.
yeah.
What's that
Um,
process like?
so I ended up drawing this book completely digitally in Clip Studio. Um, and I have a sort of a love-hate relationship, I think, with digital drawing.
Mhm.
It simplifies the process a lot because well, the way I sort of write is I guess I kind of make it up as I go along a little bit. So having it digitally means I can move things around really easily. So
Mm.
I can almost like chop up the panels and put them into different pages and things.
Mm.
So yeah, I think I ended up working on this one digitally just for the um, simplicity and flexibility of it.
Mhm.
But in terms of the look, like I like more of a handmade, like obviously handmade kind of style, which is sort of what I'm going to try and focus on in future. But when I tried that with this book, um, it just became it was hard to have the consistency of it throughout the book because I was
Mhm.
moving backwards and forwards a lot. Um, so yeah, uh, I think it works because it's quite nice and clean, and
Yeah,
it works with quite a nice contrast to the paintings.
that's what I was just thinking. I think that that works really well.
Yeah,
In that the paintings have a really tactile and sort of
mm,
physical feel to them, and then the comics parts have a very different feel. I think that works. That's a really nice contrast. So
yeah. I really like drawing by hand, but then I find with a comics panel, it's so small that it's quite hard to use like a paintbrush or a dip pen to work on something that small. So unless you're like really working on a larger scale and reducing it,
yeah.
it just becomes a bit technically challenging for my like wonky drawings. It, like just having that undo button is just really useful.
Yeah, yeah. I've definitely gone over to the digital side,
Yeah,
but I always try and make it not look digital, which is my sort of compromise because I use a lot of brushes and charcoal and pencil type tools. Not that I don't, I really like a clean digital style personally as well, but for me,
yeah,
because I started out drawing on paper, I kind of want to retain that feel.
yeah. It's it's yeah, because I've been thinking about my drawing style quite a bit. It feels strange to like change, like make a conscious effort to change how you draw.
Mm,
Yes, I guess you do develop a sort of a style that's recognizably yours, and if you
yeah.
switch it, it's like, oh, are people going to just really dislike this new style?
I wanted to ask you actually about your, because you've just completed an MA, I think, in was it
Yeah,
illustration?
yeah. So I did that part time. remotely, so it was all online, but
Oh, right.
via Falmouth. And that's, yeah, the big thing I've got out of that really is experimenting with materials.
Mm.
So, yeah, going a lot more hand drawn for these illustrations, but I haven't really applied that to comics yet. So we'll have to see if it works.
Yeah, comics is just such a demanding sort of format that it's
Yeah,
quite hard to find a way to do comics that's actually achievable and you can actually,
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, definitely over a book length comic. I think you have
Mm.
to make choices that are going to just let you let you finish it. Like
Yeah, exactly.
speaking. Um, so yeah, my idea now is to do a few short comics and just experiment a bit with
Mm.
materials and style, and I guess hopefully see if that works. But yeah, just doing 4 or 5 page comics.
Yeah. And that's really fun because you attend sort of festivals and things and sometimes, and it's kind of nice to have quite small things that you can offer
Yeah,
to people just very cheap that they can grab, a few
yeah, yeah.
small things.
Is my previous Avery Hill book, The Great Northwood. After I finished doing that, I did a load of short comics. So I
Hmm.
think I do have this almost like do a big book and then I need to unwind for a while by just doing like short things. Um,
Yeah. Um, I'm intrigued about the MA experience because I've spoken to people who've had both really good experiences and really bad ones with
yeah,
doing that. But it sounds like it was quite helpful to you in giving you a reason to kind of try different things.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it did. But I think I went into the MA thinking I was a bit down on comics, I think, at the start, and I was just like, I want to learn how to be an illustrator so I can do all like commercial work and make some money, I guess.
Mm.
And then sort of throughout the MA, just realised actually what I'd like doing is making comics. So it
Right.
feels like I've got to the end and I'm almost like back where I started, really. But I think it's going on that journey has been inspirational and I got a lot out of it,
Mm.
even though maybe I've ended up back where I started. Maybe you have to do that.
Yeah, I mean it even in just it giving you some sort of reassurance that it is the thing that
Mm.
you enjoy the most.
And just like, yeah, giving me that sort of confidence to think of myself as a comic book artist and like, you know, yeah, that I can be part of that community, I guess, or industry, something.
Mm. And so you're going to be at Thought Bubble this year. Um,
Yeah.
is that the only event that you have sort of lined up for the time?
Oh, no,
No.
I'll also be at the Winchester Comics Fair,
Oh, of
which
course.
I'm hoping to run that with my friend Julian. So yeah, I moved to Winchester about 3 years ago, and I missed the sort of comics scene in London, uh,
Mm.
and I guess realised that if I wanted these things to exist in Winchester, I had to organise them myself, really.
Did you already know of anyone there or?
So I did know Julian already. So I'd met him at Thought Bubble a few years ago. He had written a book called Silvix, I think, which was about it was like a folk horror comic set in a wood or a forest, and he had seen my comic, The Great Northwood, which was also about forests. So
Mm.
we did a book swap, forest comics book swap. Um, so yeah, when I moved to Winchester, it was like nice to get in touch with him as well.
Mm.
So that's one that you helped to sort of run. Is that coming up soon?
Yeah, the 19th of October.
19th of October, okay.
So yeah, I need to.
You'll be doing that, and then Thought Bubble, and there's also a little exhibition at Thought Bubble as well.
Yeah.
Tell people about that.
Yeah, well, I'm putting together an exhibition of my mum's paintings that I used in the book, and some of some of my, or some prints, I guess, of the comics from the book, for an exhibition in Harrogate at the Mercer Gallery,
which is right next door to the Thought Bubble venue, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. So that would be nice. So there'll be an opening night for that, where to launch the book and show off the paintings, and then the exhibition will be on for a while after that in Harrogate.
Brilliant. So yeah, that's also really nice that you get to kind of do a little exhibition, since that was something your mum didn't really ever get to.
Yeah, and it sort of, because the Mercer Gallery is like a really nice gallery, and I guess I would call it a proper gallery.
Yeah.
So when I was thinking originally, before I started the book, of where I could put on an exhibition, because so my parents live in Harrogate, so
right.
But I mean, I would never have been able to approach the Mercer Gallery and say, "Can I just have an exhibition of my mum's paintings?" Because but because there's like a book to go with it now, it's just made it viable, I guess. So it feels really nice. And she did once have a painting exhibited there. In fact, they had like a Harrogate open art exhibition. So
right.
yeah, it's nice that she, we get to show off her paintings there.
Yeah, that's actually reminded me of one other thing I was going to talk to you about Adrift on a Painted Sea, is that I think it's brilliant that you talk about that moment where there's a slight confusion about a particular painting.
Yeah,
your mum told you was exhibited as a when she was at school, I think, as part of an exhibition.
Yeah, so in the 60s they had this thing called the National Children's Art Exhibition, and I've got the booklet from it, and it has her name, and it says, the painting is called View from a Classroom Window. But she'd always told us that the painting she'd exhibited had been of these like fish that she'd done. And so it's just really like, obviously, I guess she just got confused, or and I spoke to some of her friends, her school friends, who I know still, and they all said they were set this task of doing a scene from their classroom window. So it's just,
so it couldn't
and
be
it's just one of those things. Like, if I could just ask her, like, what painting did you do? I'm sure it'd be really easily resolved. But it's just one of those things, like, it's just a mystery. There's always going to be these little things you just don't know about someone. Like,
that's why that is so interesting in the book, as a way into some of those ideas about about the people you kind of know really well, but you could never know everything about somebody. And everyone's experiences of the same things are a bit different, and everyone's memories are different. It's a really interesting way to kind of bring up all those ideas around that one specific thing.
Because it was such like she was like so proud of this painting, and it was on my I remember it on my grandparents' wall in their house. And
it's a lovely painting.
It'd just always be a thing. Like, I had this painting exhibited in a gallery in Sheffield, but it turned out it wasn't it just wasn't a painting. It's really odd.
Yeah, it's just the unreliability of memory, I guess, and the
Yeah, or
fact
just
that
like the misunderstanding, maybe. Like maybe,
mm,
or
yeah,
maybe I remembered it wrong. Like maybe she
yeah,
never said that, didn't.
yeah, it's really interesting because there's a few moments in the book where you play around with that idea of how everyone kind of has their own viewpoint, memory, and experience of certain things, like with the holidays and things. You talk a little bit about how as a kid you personally really loved exploring the caravan. just
Yeah,
just the inside of the caravan, whereas other people were more focused on
yeah.
historical
I
sites.
think, yeah, because my grandparents had this like really nice old caravan. So
Mm.
if we went to visit them in their caravan, it'd just be much more exciting to just go through all the cupboards and like, be like, wow, like you could just keep an entire kitchen in this little caravan, and
Yeah.
the fold-out beds were amazing. I loved all that stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. I would love to I've never really stayed in a caravan, but it's quite appealing to me.
Yeah. It's just such a hassle, like moving them around. But
Mm.
they're good fun.
I was actually thinking that last time I was in Scotland, because my mum lives up in the north of Scotland and
Um,
there's a caravan park campsite quite near her. And as I was walking through it the last time I was there, I was thinking this is actually one of the best things you could do in a place like Scotland or the UK where the
yeah,
weather is really unreliable. Because at least if you get kind of a terrible day's weather, you've got all your stuff in one place and you've got somewhere you can cook. If
yeah,
you're kind of stuck in a hotel room, it can be really depressing if you can't go anywhere.
yeah, yeah. Um, I think I've spoken to you before about how much I like John McNaughton's comics. And
Mm,
in Kingdom, like as part of that is set on a like caravan park
yeah.
site. And it's those beautiful there's I think it's like a full page illustration of all the caravans kind of lit up at night with the
Yeah.
stars off above it.
Yeah, we've definitely spoken about that because it's one of my favorite books as well.
Yeah, me too. It's brilliant.
And I think another point of sort of similarity of the things that I like both in your work and in his are the sort of liminal moments, like
Yeah,
um, drawing like details from car journeys and things. You've got a whole comic about car journeys, asleep in the back.
yeah.
And I,
Um,
I love those moments. As a kid, I loved car journeys because it was almost like you could go into a trance just staring out of the window.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I wrote an essay, like going back to my MA. Um, I wrote an essay about quiet comics and like how can you make
Mm,
comics quiet. And I emailed John to ask him about how he makes his comics like have this quiet, I guess like sense or feeling about them.
mm.
And yeah, it's really interesting how he does it. Like he often like has quite I guess you say a rhythm to the panels. Like there's almost a beat, and he'll put like a sound effect
Yeah.
occurring across the page, like a drip or something. And he says he tries to do that to kind of slow you down a bit. You're
Mm.
not just skimming across images, but you kind of slow down on these sound effects or kind of little incidental background noises. Like there's often like a TV playing or something,
Yeah.
like a dialogue from the TV or a
Yeah.
radio. Um,
That's really interesting. One of the scenes that I always remember from it's just a tiny moment. It's not really a scene, but in Kingdom is they stop at roadside services, and then I just remember there's a scene of one of the kids drying his hands in the
yeah,
bathroom under the hand dryer, and that just really sticks in my head as not something that a lot of people would think to illustrate or include, but it's really lovely.
yeah, it's really good, and
And
he's
also,
just brilliant at, like he can make those scenes last for like 3 or 4 pages. Whereas when I feel like once I've drawn a service station, I only want to draw it once.
yeah,
But
I'm That's what I was going to say. I think I told you before that I love that scene in Adrift on the Painted Sea where you're driving to the hospital and you stop at the services.
Yeah,
It's got that feel again of all those in between moments, the moments in between sort of big events and things. Where
yeah,
you still have to kind of experience them, but it's kind of
yeah. I think because I living in Winchester and driving up to Harrogate in Yorkshire was a 4 or 5 hour car journey, and yeah, when my mum got really seriously ill, I was sort of doing that journey every weekend for quite a few weeks, and so there was just a lot of I was just in the car a lot
mm,
on the motorway, and it was strange to sort of listen to music or the radio, so I was just quiet a lot of the time, and often like the only sort of person I would talk to would be in the service station.
mm,
Um, so yeah, those places kind of became quite felt quite meaningful, not meaningful, but quite, you know, became important, I guess, to have
mm.
really brief interactions with people.
Yeah. Well, that's one of my favorite moments in the book. I was going to ask you what you're planning on doing next, but I think you've already answered by saying that you're going to do some short comics and
Yeah,
experiments
so I
there.
started this project on my MA called Common. I called it Commonplace, and it's this little collection of short comics about where I live in Winchester. Um, I think when I moved to Winchester, I found it a bit sort of boring and slow, and because a lot of my previous comics have been about have feeling this connection with London, and I didn't really feel like I had that connection to a place anymore. Um, but then I sort of found that lack of connection almost quite interesting. Like it's like people talk about this idea of Middle England, and it's just like suburban and boring. But there's this sort of kind of undercurrent, like slightly sinister undercurrent, and like English suburbia. So I'm doing a few short comics about that, which hopefully I'll have ready for Thought Bubble, but they're not quite finished yet. So I mean, it's sort of inspired by Chris Ware's building stories, like making this box
Oh,
set, but about English suburbia rather than Chicago.
sounds brilliant. I look forward to seeing them. So, if anyone's in the Winchester area, they should definitely check out the comics festival there.
Yeah.
And if anyone's coming to Thought Bubble, they should definitely come to your exhibition opening, which is the Friday evening before the festival. And they can get their copies of the book signed. Yeah, unless you've got anything else you want to talk about.
No, that was good. Thanks.
Oh,
I feel like I
okay.
got it all off my chest.